Hello, everyone. My name is Sherry Tillett, and I'm from Niagara Falls. I am a deaf individual, and I just wanted to express with my signed language rather than writing, typing, emailing, trying to gesture to speak. That's not my preferred method. I would rather use my signed language to express as to what happened to me today at the Greater Niagara General Hospital. This was on March 20th, 2015 at 6:30 p.m. in the emergency room registration area. Let me just explain to you what happened. Really, when I arrived, I was familiar where the MRI room was. I walked over and I saw that the sign had a label over where the MRI used to stand. There was a label over top of it. Does that mean it moved? I had no idea. I looked around, I was unsure. I did have an appointment at 6:30 p.m. with an interpreter, so I was just trying to locate the interpreter. Wasn't too sure where I would be meeting them. So I went ahead and walked over to the emergency room, the registration area. And what I did was, I walked over and I saw there was a nurse, a registration nurse, Marlene, typing away. In the cubicle next to her, there was a nurse working with some patients, busy, so I thought I would leave her be. So the nurse that was typing away, of course I didn't know where, I didn't know what I was supposed to do. So what I did was, I walked over to that nurse, Marlene, that was typing away. She looked up at me, and I showed her my phone with this message, gesturing where would I go. What did she do? She shooed me away, shooing me away, and went back to typing away. It was very fast. It was less than 5 seconds our interaction. She went back to typing away. I thought, well, did I understand what she said? Of course not. I kind of looked over at her and stood there patiently waiting. I waited for her to look back up at me. She was typing away. I would say this was about 2 minutes that I was standing there waiting. I was patiently waiting. I knew she was busy. She was typing away. She walked over to the printer, grabbed some printer paper. She was working on what seemed to be some sticky labels. She was peeling them, putting them on the charts, and so what I did was I went ahead and tapped on the glass on the window, and she looked up at me and shooed me away and gave me this gesture. I thought, well, I just want to know where. I just wanted to know where. So I stood there, and she went back to working away, working on her labels, and completely ignored me. And there was people in the waiting area, other patients, and they were all looking at me, and I wondered, well, that's fine. I approached over to a security guard, and I said, she's talking to me, I don't understand. I showed him the same message. Where is the MRI? I showed him my phone, and he said, oh, okay. He said, it's just this way down the corner. He described the direction. Perfect, great, thank you. So I walked over and I ignored that nurse, Marlene, and I went over to where the MRI was. I met the interpreter there. Perfect. And the interpreter told me that the MRI department had called over and said I need to go over to the emergency room to register. So I said, well, that's fine. I notified the interpreter as to what happened with the nurse, and the interpreter said, oh, I'm sorry to hear. So we walked over together, and as we were walking by, we saw the nurse, Marlene. She was sitting at the desk with patients. 2 patients were sitting there, and I guess they were in the process of registering. There was 2 nurses in different cubicles. In any event, the nurse, Marlene, she saw me walking by. She stood up and started yelling, with the interpreter, of course, saying, oh, well, I tried to tell her to sit down and da-da-da-da-da. And what did I do? Well, I interrupted her, and I said, no, you said this. Does that mean to sit down? With your horrible attitude? Then Marlene started to say, oh, I'm so busy because there's a patient that had a heart attack, etc., etc. And I told her, okay, well, if you were busy, you could have simply said, please sit down in a nice manner, rather than this gesture you did. And then she rolled her eyes, sat back down, and focused back onto her patients. In any event, the interpreter and I went ahead and sat down in the waiting area. A few moments went by, and they called my name. We approached over to the nurse. You know, there was a nurse sitting there, not the nurse Marlene. She's not the one who called me, but we approached the nurse, and what did Marlene do? She got up and said the same exact thing. I tried to tell you to sit down, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, no, not with your horrible attitude and this gesture. What does that even mean? Then she proceeded to add in that I shook my phone, and I told her I never did that. First, what I did is I asked her nicely, showing her the phone to read the message as to where is the MRI, and that was it. I didn't shake my phone and antagonize her. I just tried to get her to read this because I can't speak. Please. She started to argue with me, and I told her I didn't want any arguments. So the nurse that called me was sitting there very quietly, and she was a nice lady, but she was very quiet. And I said, forget it, I don't want to deal with this, I'm going to sit back down. I was very disappointed with her attitude. What did I ever do to her? In any event, I went ahead and asked the nurse I was working with, who I was registering with, if she wouldn't mind to give me some sort of contact information as to who I could make a complaint to. So she pulled out this card and gave it to me, and I said, well, do you mind adding in the name of this nurse Marlene over here? I wasn't too sure of her name at the time, and she wrote down the name. So this is the card here. So now I'm planning to inform this company with this video and express as to what happened in the hospital. I'm planning to file a complaint against this nurse, Marlene, and I really hope that she will make an apology. Thank you for listening to my expression. And now you do know that there is the Ontario Disabilities, there's a law, and I would hope that you will take this action. And thank you.